Hey traders, David Frost, my strategic forecast. You're here for another episode of Common Sense Market Analysis. Today is Thursday, September 8, 2022. We're looking at a daily chart of the SPY or Spider, which is the proxy for the S&P 500. What do we have on the docket today? We got a lot of stuff on the docket. We're going to go through both the bull and the bear case, looking at it from a slightly different perspective than we did last night. We're looking around the horn. We want as much evidence as we can collect to give us the best scenario, the best idea of what's going to happen going forward. Let's start out with the tinfoil hat event situation. So at the end of this week really begins the tinfoil hat situation. There's two separate events. They're independent of one another. However, they happen around the same time. Interesting. And then, just to add insult to injury, next week is quadruple witching options expiration week. We have the futures contract roll going on. Weird stuff happens during the roll. Some weird stuff can and normally does happen during quadruple witching options expiration week. What is that exactly? That's when all the asset classes, all the quarterly options, the monthly options, everything's expiring all at once. We can put that in the camp of weird stuff is likely to get thrown into the bucket. So what we're saying is they're going to move the tape. Likely thing is in both directions. My thing is I believe we're going to see larger moves than we've been seeing of late beginning next week. So be on guard. Can they move them in both directions? And the answer is absolutely and a resounding yes. So let's talk about the bull case for a moment. So we have our trend line, and one more time, what does that trend line represent? It represents a lot of things. Represent Mrs. Market making the trend line out of connecting the pivot lows, but what it also represents was a completion. What does that mean? Well, if you take this head and shoulders pattern that existed, and I showed you, and I also teach this in the course, Lazy E-mini Trader, how to come up with the actual target. The head and shoulders pattern has a completion or target on the downside. That happened. We went over it the other day. They almost hit it basically to the penny. So here's the thing. You have to look at this from a what is everybody else thinking perspective. And we don't know what everybody's thinking, but let's take a guess at one side of the tape. One side of the tape is, hey, they had a head and shoulders, played out, went down to the penny. That's complete. The trend line held. It was a 618 retracement. If you remember that, we went over that the last couple of videos. We call that a garden variety and a golden ratio retracement. So you have a whole series of things that actually line up with a full stack situation for a bounce off that trend line, and we're getting that bounce now. We also talked about bouncing right into the convergence of moving averages. We see that happening at the close today. You can see where they finished. They're very close to that spot. It also coincides with the high of that breakdown candle. That high specifically is 401.56. Can they spike it? Absolutely. Can they close a day above it, for example, tomorrow? And the answer is we'll find out. And if they do, what does that do? It opens the door for another leg higher. To where? Well, my guesstimation based on the mathematics, based on everything that's going on, based on the all aboard type of situation leading into the front end or beginning part of options expiration next week, we could say they would get up into the 405 to 407 vicinity / neighborhood. Any more than that? I'm not exactly there yet. Just out of curiosity, can anybody tell me what the 405, give or take, represents? I'll wait. It represents around a 382 retracement from recent high to recent low, recent high, recent low, retrace a portion of the move. About a 382 retrace is right over here. That would be a natural place that's magnetic and will draw price in, will also act as, and you guessed it, overhead resistance. That's the bull case for the next few days. What's the bear case? Well, The immediate bear case is you wake up in the morning, they pulled the rug out, opened the trap door, and they're headed into the abyss. That's item number one. Is that likely? Unlikely? We have no idea. That's not necessarily on the table, but if it happens, it's an awareness. That could happen at any point in time. That's an awareness. Did I mention that? Put it on a sticky note. And for now, we're still using the trend line as our new address for Irene. Start getting below the trend line and the floodgates are going to begin to crack open. Have they made a good low yet? That would be an institutional signal that they were buying up the market and there's a whole new bull case leg higher coming. And the answer is no. We still don't have a bona fide or sufficient low in the market. No way, no how. It's just part of the inventory of the situation. I was also asked today in relation to the fact that the Queen passed, and everybody knows that by now. Is that part of the quote unquote, and these are air quotes, weird stuff happens? And you don't know what is and what isn't part of the weird stuff happens when stuff happens. And that's not necessarily weird in its sense, but maybe the timing of it should have us raising our eyebrows. I don't think it has any kind of direct relation or impact on the market. I'm not sure the Queen was in the market. Not sure. Maybe she had an E-Trade account. We don't know. And therefore, it appears we have a new king on the docket, or at least they do. How does that work anyway? What do you need a king or queen for? Don't answer that. I really don't want to know the answer. What's going on inside the numbers? I think it's important you get out the sticky note, pen and paper, whatever it is, because you're going to learn some things from an inside the number perspective today. We'll start with the happy Thursday, waking up around the flat line after a rally attempt in the wee hours of the morning. Normal garden variety activity. As for today's tape, we'll start out with yesterday's prize of 398.50 and it becomes today's pivot. Let's get our faculties with the pictures. 398.50 is the horizontal line. Right at the vertical is today's activity. And also what you can see is right here, and then all of a sudden here and here, you can see the importance that is an important spot. Yesterday it was important at the close. Today it was an important spot after the opening bell. The high in this candle, 398.49, when they came from the lows all the way to run a test of the pivot. They play games, they come up 1 penny short and have a pretty decent pullback. No accidents or coincidences. Below, we've got some important stuff in 397. We have 396 and a quarter down to 395. You'll see these numbers come out also later on as we get the day underway. Read the notes, go back to the chart to double check the work. As always, I'm going to point out a few important things that traders were certainly able to take advantage of today. Here's something important. They're getting closer to the big fat round number of SPY 400. The closer price gets, remember in the pre-market, they weren't over there. They finished the day over there. The closer price gets, the more magnetic these numbers become. Above 400 or so on candle closes, we'll handle that in a real-time type of formation. We had a little activity in the pre-market, but there's an important thing here, method to the madness. Watch this. So around 8:15, the ECB comes out. They raise their interest rate 75 basis points. Okay, fair enough. They're just following suit in lockstep with the Fed. Fair enough. The news hits. The market pops higher immediately, but to where? Right to the pivot. Same chart, but different. This one includes the pre-market activity, and you can see here, this is 7:15 before that announcement, and then they pull away, and then look at this. 8:05, they pull away. They do it again at 8:20, so around 8:15 when they came out with the announcement, they whipped the market around, but they couldn't really get through that price. And then what happened? They sold off pretty hard from that pivot. So watch this. When I see that price action, why is that important? It simply helps to confirm the importance of today's pivot, at least for now. Above, it's bullish for 400. Below, and the door is open for 397, give or take, and potentially lower, and they did go lower. That comes out later in the notes. And here's what I mean. Much below 397, and there's a big vacuum situation for lower numbers, and that was down to 385 and even lower. At this time, it was all awareness stuff. We're moving along. Did anybody short that number after the ECB announcement or with that announcement. Did anybody short the number and take the ride down? I don't know. Bueller. There should be support around 395, 394.65 zone. Remember, this is in the pre-market. This is 9:10. We're back to the regular hours. This is after the opening bell. So this is 9:35 candle, 9:40, 9:45 candle on this 5-minute chart. What's that horizontal line represent? 394.65, the number that showed up in the pre-market activity in the notes. It pays to know your numbers. We're moving along. Read the notes, go back to the chart to double check the work. I said I wanted to point out a couple of important things. I'm not going to read the whole thing with the interest of time, but I do want you to understand what's going on here. So you see when they bounce around in the morning rush time frame situation above the day's high at the time, then it opens the door for 397. They actually did that. See here, after running a test of the support area, they turned around, went right back up to the 397. And here we have a nice trade on play. We'll circle back to stocks on the move. 945. The bulls are trying to get back to a zone. 397.80 to 398.50, which is the pivot. 397.80 was the gap left open from yesterday. So you have a zone in between. There's actually not that much space. They can hit one, fall away. They can bust it through and go to the pivot. Either way, that's why it's a zone. And then, of course, remember, they went back to the pivot. They got over the pivot. They went to where? 400. 400.25 is the number that'll show up in the notes. That's what they did. The door was open over the pivot for 400. We certainly had some traders that were happy to trade it up there. We also had some traders that bought down there at support this morning. Nice job. We're moving along. Read them. Check the work. If you're an active trader during the trading day, then this is information that can benefit you. If you know the numbers, you can make the trades. Not only am I giving you the numbers, I'm giving you the commentary along with it. Here it is, 1038. Traders long can ride the tape up to 400.25, give or take, at which point there should be a reaction in the other direction. What does that mean? That means that they should stop going up and at least go sideways, if not a bona fide pullback. 1038. So now let's get our faculties again. That was at 1038, so that's down here. So they get up to the 400.25. That's what they should have done. That's a magnetic place. So it drew price in. And then what we wrote after that was, once they get up there, there should be a reaction in the other direction. And it was looking something like this. Now, you don't know exactly what kind of reaction in the other direction you're going to get. These type of trades start out as a scalp trade. They morph into something more. And the way we do it is you take some profit along the way. You're holding a trailer. You don't let whatever you're holding go negative on you. And sometimes you can participate in the big flush out. Pause the video, read the notes, go back to the chart to double check the work. Everything you need is in here. Do you want to actually double check to see if it was right, to see if it would help you during the trading day? And the answer is yes, it can. Stocks on the move. So we're going to take a look at WMB, CSIQ, and Play. The other two are off the board. They never hit their entry objectives. Therefore, they become no trades. That's MKC and UAL. Williams Company's getting a haircut at the opening bell. 3168 was the number posted around 0 dark 30. They come into the number. They bounce away. They provide the minimum required base hit and then some. Come back to double check the number and provide the same base hit in the end of the day. Now, that's not to say a trader is taking it twice, but it is confirmation that the number is important. And by the way, the numbers work. CSIQ, Canadian Solar, you can see what happens. They come into the thing midday, they hover around for a while, and then they start trending back up in the other direction. The numbers work. Dave & Buster's Play, the first number worked, the second number worked, the second number worked, the third number worked. And I'm just saying, right? Nobody took this trade into the end of the day. I get that, but we're just looking at the chart, looking at the numbers, and seeing what happened around the numbers that were put out at what? Yeah, 0 dark 30. How you doing? What's going on over in Camp IWM? Anything new and exciting? No, they're doing the same thing that the S&P's doing. The same conversation that we had before applies. They never did hit this trend line. I find that rather curious. Are they making a higher low and going to take off to the upside, or will this trend line be broken and we're going to crash through Irene's house? We're going to find out next week for sure. Folks down at the transportation department, nothing doing here. They're actually going sideways. They're starting to eat time off the clock down in this neck of the woods. So until or unless they can get going and at least run a test into these moving averages, the convergence of these two, the 50 and the 100, if they can't even do that, then this is weakness. That's the signal. That's the evidence. And they're likely going to release some energy in the southern direction. What about the Q people? What have we been talking about here? How about running a test back up from below that trend line? They pretty much did it today. I'm not sure they touched it exactly, but who can say whether this trend line exactly on the penny or not? But when you look at it from an eyeballs perspective, they ran a test from underneath the trend line. Now, know this, recapturing the trend line, albeit could be temporary or not, is still a bullish signal. That would be on the bullish side of the ledger. Recapturing it intraday, one thing. Recapturing it on a close, another thing. Recapturing it on 2 consecutive closes, something different altogether. We'll see if they can close above the trend line and above the breakdown candle high, which is right here. That high is 303.75 and into or above those moving averages. That's really what the bulls need to have happen over the next day or so. Pretty big rip higher for the XLF and company inside. Higher low, dead cat bounce, bullish, bearish. Well, we don't know yet right now. It's not so bad, and this is a weekly chart, not so bad for the bull case if they can get up and into and above this 35 and change area, this 100 period moving average. A test from underneath is one thing. They can easily fall away. Closing above it is a different thing, and that could open the door for another leg higher in the financials. And if that's happening, it's very unlikely the rest of the market is unraveling simultaneously. It's an unlikely situation. Smash Mouth hanging around this 208.65 price, and in doing so, they're really just going back and forth, creating one of these eating time off the clock bearish formations. If they can get going, the first order of business would be to get back above 215. If they can do that, then they can start working on the convergence of these moving averages, not all in one bite, but certainly on the table. That's a tall order right now, but if you get a rally on Friday and into the weekend, and then possibly coming out of the weekend on Monday, all these markets will inflate a little bit. Rising tide lifts all boats, and then we'll see what happens for the rest of quadruple witching options expiration week while the tinfoil hat stuff is going on. If I told you how much I appreciate each and every one of you, without you, these videos are not possible. That is true and accurate information. We're pulling the ripcord here today. I'm David Frost, my strategic forecast. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Common Sense Market Analysis.